What if I told you that the Rome you know, the Rome of the Caesars and the empires, would never have existed without a nearly forgotten people and a series of events that seem to have come straight from a novel? Today we will take a fascinating journey into the deepest roots of Roman civilization, long before the legionaries conquered the world. We will discover how a fragmented and mysterious Italy shaped the cradle of an empire, and how myths and centuries old struggles gave birth to the most powerful republic of antiquity. Get ready to dig beneath the foundations of Rome to understand what came before, who influenced its birth, and how it became the power we all know. Imagine Italy thousands of years ago. It wasn't united at all, as we see it on maps today. It was a veritable mosaic of cultures, a tangle of different peoples, each with its own languages, traditions, and gods. From the Ligurians in the north to the Samnites in the center to the Greeks in the south, the peninsula was a melting pot of human experiences. But among all these peoples, one in particular played a crucial role in the birth of Rome, the Etruscans. This civilization, which flourished mainly in what we now call Tuscany, was a true beacon of refinement and innovation, and without them, Rome would never have been the same. Think of them as the silent architects of the Roman foundations. The impact of the Etruscans on Rome was simply enormous, an indelible mark that manifests itself in so many aspects of Roman culture and institutions. It was not a simple influence, but a real transmission of knowledge and lifestyles. Take art. Roman statues, decorations, and metalwork often recall the Etruscan style, with its robust forms and attention to detail. But it is in architecture that the Etruscan legacy stands out even more clearly. Rome, the Eternal City, is built on techniques perfected by the Etruscans. The arch and the vault revolutionary structures that allowed for larger and more stable buildings, are not Roman inventions, they are Etruscan legacies. Without the arch, we would not have had aqueducts, majestic bridges, or entire temples that defied time. Roman religion, then, is a melting pot of influences, and the Etruscan one is among the most important. Many deities worshipped by the Romans, and even some of their divinatory practices, such as the art of reading the future in the entrails of animals or the observation of lightning, haruspicy, and augury, derived directly from the Etruscans. It is no coincidence that the first priests and diviners in Rome were often Etruscan or trained according to their rites. Even in the language, although Latin is not directly related to Etruscan, there are traces and loanwords, words that have merged into the Roman vocabulary. It is as if the Etruscans had provided part of the lexicon for the language of the future empire. But Etruscan influence was not limited to the most obvious cultural aspects. It also shaped Roman political organization. The figure of the king in Rome, with his insignia of power such as the curule sella and the fasces, has its roots in Etruscan practices. Even many of the ceremonial practices, from military triumphs to funeral processions, show clear analogies with Etruscan rites. The sophistication of this civilization, their economic power based on the control of mines and trade, and their military prowess gave Rome not only tools and knowledge, but also a model of grandeur and organization. They were a fundamental bridge between the prehistoric cultures of Italy and the nascent Roman power, a crossroads of ideas and technologies that allowed Rome to make its qualitative leap. And so we come to the beginnings of Rome, a tale that is a fascinating mix of myth and historical reality, where legends intertwine with archaeological evidence. The most famous story, the one we all know, is the legend of Romulus and Remus. These two twins, abandoned and nursed by a wolf, grew up and one day decided to found a city right where they had been found. But as often happens when it comes to founding something big, things don't always go smoothly. Romulus and Remus argued over the exact location, and according to legend, Romulus killed Remus, becoming the first king of Rome on April 21st, 753 BC. This date, which is so precise for us today, marks the beginning of an era. Of course, it is a myth, but a powerful myth, which gave Rome an epic and glorious origin, a bit like a trademark for its future greatness. For over 2 centuries, Rome was ruled by 7 kings. Not all are purely legendary figures. Tradition tells us of Romulus, the founder, of Numa Pompilius, the wise king who gave Rome its first laws and religious institutions, of Tullus Hostilius, the warrior king, of Ancus Martius, who expanded the city's borders and founded the port of Ostia. But then came the more historical kings, often of Etruscan origin, such as Tarquinius Priscus, Servius Tullius, and Tarquinius Superbus. With them, Rome grew, strengthened, and began to consolidate its power in Lazio. It was a period of great urban development, with the construction of public works such as the Cloaca Maxima, the city's sewer system, and the expansion of the Forum. The Etruscan kings brought with them a broader, more organized vision, laying the foundations for what would become an unstoppable power. This monarchic period, with its ups and downs, its victories, and its tyrannies, was fundamental in forging Rome's identity. But the history of Rome is also a history of ruptures and transformations. The chapter of the monarchy ended dramatically. In 509 BC, after centuries of monarchical rule, the last king, Tarquinius Superbus, was expelled from the city. His tyranny and a scandalous event involving the matron Lucretia pushed the people and the aristocracy to rebel, vowing never to tolerate a king again. It was an epochal turning point, the birth of a new political system that would change the destiny of Rome and consequently of the world forever, the Republic. Suddenly, power was no longer in the hands of one man, but was divided, shared, and in theory, more just. Republican institutions were complex and ingenious, designed to prevent the return of tyranny. At the top were the consuls, two magistrates elected annually, who held executive and military power, like presidents, but with broader powers. This annual election is with a 1 year term limit and the need to govern in agreement with each other was a guarantee against the centralization of power. Then there was the Senate, the beating heart of the Republic. Made up of members of Rome's most important and influential families, the Senate had a consultative role but actually held enormous moral and political authority, controlling finance, foreign policy, and the general direction of the state. No important decision could be made without his approval. And finally, there were the comitia, the popular assemblies. They were the places where citizens elected magistrates and voted on laws. There were different types of comitia, each with its own functions and composition, but they all reflected the idea that the people, at least a part of them, had a say. But don't think that the Republic was a utopia of justice and equality from the beginning. It was anything but. The history of the First Republic is a long and sometimes bloody struggle between two social classes, the patricians and the plebeians. The patricians were the aristocracy, the descendants of the oldest and wealthiest Roman families. They held almost all political and economic power. They were the senators, consuls, and priests. The plebeians, on the other hand, were the vast majority of the population, artisans, farmers, small traders. They worked, they fought for Rome, but they had few rights and no political representation. It was a deeply unbalanced system, and this generated a social conflict that lasted for almost 2 centuries, a real civil war without continuous bloodshed, but made up of threats, retreats, and negotiations. This struggle was by no means easy, but it led to fundamental reforms that shaped the Republic. The plebeians, with their secession on the Aventine, that is, the threat to abandon Rome and found their own city, managed to obtain crucial conquests. The most important was the creation of the tribunes of the plebs, sacred and inviolable figures who had the power to veto any decision of the magistrates or the Senate that they deemed harmful to the plebs. It was a true revolution, which gave the plebeians a voice and a means to protect their interests. Then came the laws of the 12 Tables, the first written codification of Roman law, displayed publicly in the Forum. Finally, the laws were no longer arbitrary or the monopoly of the patricians, but were written down and accessible to all. Over time, the plebeians also gained the right to access all public offices, including that of consul, and mixed marriages between patricians and plebeians became legal. The Republic, though born from a conflict and plagued by internal tensions, not only survived but evolved and strengthened precisely thanks to these struggles. This constant push and pull between classes, this continuous negotiation of rights and powers forged a robust and adaptable political system, capable of facing internal and external challenges. It is incredible to think how such an imperfect system managed to overcome its initial divisions to lay the foundations for an expansion and dominion that would embrace the entire Mediterranean, making Rome the superpower of its time. From the Etruscans to the Seven Kings, from the legends of its foundation to the fierce battles for rights, Rome's journey is an incredible tale of how diverse cultures, powerful myths, and social conflicts shaped one of the most enduring civilizations in history. Understanding these origins is not just knowing the past, but understanding the roots of our present. Want to find out how the Roman Republic conquered the world.